Good morning. In today's devotion in the Psalms, we're going to be heading into Psalm 96, a psalm of reverent praise. First, though, it'll be quite helpful to get some context for when this psalm was written. Back in 1 Samuel chapter 4, we read of one of the many battles that Israel had with the Philistines. The Israelites were losing, suffering many fatalities, and so the elders thought it was wise to bring the Ark of the Covenant out to the battlefield, thinking that that would ensure God's presence and thus victory. This backfired spectacularly, though, as the Ark was captured by the Philistines. This most holy item in all of Israel had been lost. God was still in control, though, and brought much suffering on the Philistines in whose possession it was, until eventually they relinquished it back to Israel. Skipping forward a little while, once David had started his reign as king, he arranged for it to be transported to Jerusalem. But on the way, a man reached out to stabilize the ark by touching it, and was struck dead by God right on the spot. This no doubt had a very sobering effect on David and the men around him, making them realize the awe and reverence that their God truly deserves. So then, once again, they started transporting the ark to Jerusalem, but this time ascribing God the appropriate reverence. 1 Chronicles 15 tells us of the immense preparation that went into this. David danced and sang before the Lord the whole way, worshipping him, and that is where this psalm comes from. It was written then or just after the ark had been delivered to Jerusalem. So bearing the context in mind, let's read together what David had to say during that time. Psalm 96 from verse 1. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name, proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among the peoples. For great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For all gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and glory are in his sanctuary. Ascribe to the Lord, all you families of nations. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Bring an offering and come into his courts. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Let the heavens rejoice. Let the earth be glad. Let the sea resound and all that is in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. Let all creation rejoice before the Lord, for he comes. He comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness and the peoples in his faithfulness. David is very clearly in awe of the Lord all throughout this psalm, and is even urging the whole earth, all the nations, all of creation, the fields, seas, and heavens, to rejoice in him. This psalm has been called by some the missionary hymn because of how it implores people to spread word of his glory. But it also displays some quite notable characteristics of biblical worship, which is what I'd like us to focus on this morning. First and foremost, we see that worship is to be grounded in the recognition and celebration of his greatness, with the focus on him, not us. This psalm again and again shows us God's character. From verse 4, great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and glory are in his sanctuary. Then verse 9, worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Tremble before him, all the earth. The world is firmly established. It cannot be moved. He will judge the peoples with equity. Not once in this psalm is the individual who is worshiping the Lord mentioned. Worship is not about you, and it's not about me, but it's about the one who actually deserves it. It does, of course, have an effect on us, as it should, but that's not the primary objective. If we go into worship with the attitude of what we can get out of it, we're sure to be disappointed because it is grounded in the wrong place. So then, if true worship is grounded in recognizing God's greatness, I'm sure you'll agree with me then that recognizing this greatness is not just something that happens. It takes effort and preparation. So if we want to truly worship God, we should prepare our hearts beforehand, reminding ourselves of why He's worthy of praise. Secondly, worship ascribes glory, but does not add to it. The definition of ascribe is to regard a quality as belonging to someone, but not necessarily giving it to them. It's not like God lacked glory and our worshipping Him gives Him some. Rather, He is already infinitely glorious, and there's nothing we can do to make Him more perfect. We need to understand our place compared to Him. So when we worship Him, let's not think that we're doing Him a favor. We must be reverent in the way that we worship. When he wrote this psalm, David had just witnessed a man being struck dead by God for something that had initially seemed insignificant. But it was a reminder to him, and it should be for us too, that God takes His holiness very seriously and will not be mocked. So then, let's worship the Lord reverently. Thirdly, God is especially honored when all of creation worships Him. Now, when I say this, we may immediately think of non-Christians who won't be worshipping Him. Of course, God has given us the responsibility to preach His word and to spread the good news, and He will save the souls of many. The psalm especially implores all peoples of the world to honor Him, and that will only happen in this lifetime if we follow God's leading to spread the gospel. But for now, I'd like us to focus more on our own worship for a moment. If we look at 1 Chronicles 15, the chapter where David is dancing in front of the ark and praising God as it's transported, we read in verse 29, "As the ark of the covenant of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul," that is, David's wife, "watched from a window. And when she saw King David dancing and celebrating, she despised him in her heart." David was glorifying the Lord here, but Michal despised it. I'd like to point out here that it's not only unbelievers that don't honor the Lord with worship. Sometimes it's us too. How often do we complain about the worship music at church, or get angry with someone for the way they're worshiping, or judge other churches for their worship? Now, yes, there are indeed ways that individuals and churches can dishonor the Lord with their worship. God is a God of order. But let's not be so quick to jump to the conclusion that the other is always in the wrong. Let's first assess our hearts and not be overly critical of others, not thinking that the way we worship is somehow superior to theirs. That attitude shows that our focus is actually on ourselves and that our worship is not grounded in God's greatness. So then, let's honor the Lord by worshiping together, not letting these little divisions get in the way. Fourthly, worship is to be all the time, not just on Sundays. In verse 2, "Sing to the Lord, praise His name, proclaim His salvation day after day." Worship is always and ever appropriate. There isn't a time when it isn't the thing to do. We are so good at compartmentalizing our lives, even without realizing, where we put God in a box that we only open on Sundays. However, we just spoke of how God takes His holiness very seriously. And so do you think He'll really take well to this approach? Treating God with reverence extends to all areas of our lives, every day of the week. Of course, worship is not just singing. We can worship God simply by obeying Him in the little things we do throughout the day, or praying to Him, or silently praising Him. Even reading a psalm to the Lord is a form of praise. Whatever you do, whether you eat or drink, do all for the glory of God. If we are mindful of the Lord throughout the day, not taking Him for granted, recognizing that all we are doing is from the Lord, then we're well on our way to having a better worshipful attitude. After all, if God is as great as He says He is, then he deserves praise every moment of every day, not just once a week. Then lastly, coming off the back of the previous point, worship is to be a public thing, done so that unbelievers may see. It's not only private. Every moment of every day we are to worship, even in public. Again, I'm not just talking about singing, but worshipping in the multitude of other ways that are possible. The psalm is full of exhortations to proclaim the name of the Lord, most notably in verse 10. Say among the nations, the Lord reigns. Are we not worshipping the Lord when we publicly proclaim that he reigns? The worship that we engage in our private lives should extend publicly as well, so that unbelievers may see and perhaps start asking questions. Why do you live your life that way? Why do you believe these things? Our witness and testimony is a very powerful tool for evangelism, but there needs to be consistency for it to be effective. You can't live in a way that does not portray God to unbelievers and then expect them to believe you when you talk about the things that God has done for you. So then, how do you worship the Lord? This psalm is quite a challenge to us in the way that we worship. Worship must be grounded in the Lord, with the focus on him, not on us. We must not think that we're doing God a favor or adding to his glory by worshipping him, as if he lacked glory to begin with. Unity in worship is very God-honoring, as well as worshipping him throughout the week, both privately and publicly. In short, proper reverence and fear of the Lord is the foundation of biblical worship. That's portrayed by this psalm. So then, if we want to worship the Lord well, let's seek after the fear of the Lord.